Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings, as we actually have seen a number of warnings issued for tomorrow, because in fact we are going to be seeing a named storm arrive. Storm Debi is going to be arriving for much of the Republic of Ireland, northern Wales, northern England into southern Scotland through tomorrow. Now I did say over the past few days there is the risk of a period of stormy weather starting tomorrow, and there was the risk of a named storm in there a few days ago, but the risk of that did diminish quite significantly in the last couple of days. But overnight last night, obviously the runs have picked up this system a little bit more, and we have seen the system named. Now I'm surprised it's been named simply because we only have yellow warnings issued, so by no means is it anywhere near as Storm Babet or Storm Ciaran, but regardless, it is still a named storm and still could cause some issues in northern areas, with it is looking like a very small area of pretty intense winds and generally gustier winds quite widely. So have a look at the latest from the weather warnings. We'll have a look at the latest from the UKV, looking at Storm Debi through tomorrow, and then we'll have a look at the longer ranges. It's continuing to look very interesting, and there definitely has been a trend, especially in the GFS and its ensembles, for colder signs as we head into the second half of November. Nothing major, but definitely a shift more towards cooler, dry conditions today. It's been hinted at, but definitely quite a few more runs appearing within that sort of pattern today. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well. The link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see we've got some sort of persistent rain heading in from the west at the moment. It's been very cold and drab today. The upper air temperatures have actually been rising, but the surface, because of all this cloud and rain, it's trapped a layer of cold air, and along with the rain and cloud, it's just meant temperatures really have been in the mid to high single digits quite widely today. So it's been very cold, probably the coldest day of autumn so far, and it will be increasing in temperature as more unsettled, milder air does come in with Storm Debi tomorrow. But as I said, it's been pretty miserable today, and this very slow moving weather front that is heading in and has been moving in all day really is starting to clear further eastwards, and behind it we see much more mobile Atlantic weather patterns. And out to the southwest now, just starting to impact parts of northwestern France, the outer bands of what will be Storm Debi, which is, as I said, arriving through tomorrow. Now, I said if we put on the temperatures, it's a cold day. You can see milder conditions are coming into the south and the west at the moment, but further northwards and eastwards, especially for northern England and Scotland, blues and lighter blues appearing, indicating temperatures mid to low single digits. So really quite cold, but as I said, luckily those temperatures will be rising over the next 24 hours as milder Atlantic air moves in, associated with Storm Debi. So do have a look at the weather warnings. You can see we've got quite a few warnings issued for tomorrow. Nowhere near, as I said, intense as Storm Ciaran or Storm Babet. It is, as I said, still a named storm. There still is issues, but we're not thinking anything too major. We'll start with a small warning up towards eastern Scotland. This is persistent rain across northeastern Scotland may cause disruption to travel and flooding from 10 a.m. until 9 p.m. tomorrow. And again, it's heavy rain with Storm Debi, likely to see 30 to 50 millimetres across 12 hours or so. High impact, low likelihood. Head to Northern Ireland. We've had this warning issued for a couple of days now, but it's upgraded to include wind now from 3 a.m. until 2 p.m. for Storm Debi. Here we're looking at 30 to 40 miles per hour in 6 hours, and then 55 to 60 miles per hour quite widely inland as well, and maybe coastal areas of 65 to 75 miles per hour. And then finally we've got this widespread yellow wind warning issued for northern Wales, northern England, just about potentially getting into southern Scotland, but I think officially it stops right on the border. Again, Storm Debi from 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. We're looking at 60 to 65 mile per hour gusts, and maybe 70 to 80 mile per hour around coasts. Relatively high impact, rising in likelihood. So there's a small possibility we could see an amber issued within this. But from having a look at the models already, I do think it will be unlikely we do see an upgrade. And if we did, it would be very much a nowcast situation. So do have a look at the latest UKV. You can see that rain moving in earlier today, really drip and drab, and slowly clearing eastwards through tonight. Briefly dry for a few hours overnight, and then Storm Debi arrives with some really quite intense rainfall on its northern and eastern flank. You can see the hook there developing across parts of the Republic of Ireland. That's where the intense winds will be, but as we'll see from the wind gusts in a moment, nowhere near as intense as Storm Ciaran, but as I said, still could cause some issues. Most of the extreme rain moves through by Monday morning into the early afternoon, still lingering across eastern Scotland. That's why we have a weather warning issued, but elsewhere starts to die down. And through Monday evening should be a lot better. As we head into Tuesday, more showers pushing in from the west, still looking quite unsettled, and then could see another area of rain, maybe an intense system moving in down this back edge on Thursday, as it generally remains fairly unsettled through much of the rest of the working week, before it could turn slightly drier towards next weekend, but we'll focus on that more over the next couple of days. If you look at the upper air temperatures, you can see milder air is moving in at the moment, and that's why it will be probably warmer tomorrow. But then colder air will return by the end of the week with much fresher air masses. But you still see there are some warmer cores to the lows that could, as I said, enhance the rainfall further southwards. If we look at the wind gusts, you can see it's gusty in places today, but nothing too extreme. And then you see Storm Debi arriving. Again, still pretty intense, but nowhere near the 80, 90, 100 miles per hour we saw with Storm Ciaran. Much more likely 50 to 70 miles per hour. Could be a local batch of 60 to 80 miles per hour there along the Irish Sea coast, just for a time, a couple hours in the morning there. But just compare the size of those intense winds to the extreme size we had for Storm Ciaran. So yes, it is a named storm, but we're not expecting anywhere near as severe conditions or anywhere near as widespread conditions. But you can see here, very locally, pretty severe winds could be seen. But you can see as soon as it moves inland, those winds do die back a little bit more towards the 50 to 60 mile per hour wind point before clearing. So it does intensify very quickly through tomorrow morning. A couple of hours where it could be 70, 80 miles per hour and then dying out. So it really has picked up in the last couple of days. It has been looking gusty for a while, but definitely this intense period of maybe 3 to 6 hours through tomorrow morning, that's probably the main reason why this has been named. It is going to be a very small band of intense winds, but as I said, it could be 3 to 6 hours long and could be pretty severe in those Irish Sea coasts, potentially coming in further inland for northern England. As we clear Monday evening into Tuesday, we do see more areas of stronger winds, and again, as we head into the latter part of the week, we could see some more stronger winds in southern areas, as we could see some more intense lows move in. But again, I wouldn't look at that in too much detail at this stage, as it's still too far away, and as we've seen with Storm Debi, things can change at very short notice. If you look at the max temperatures, it's going cold today. Look at those max temperatures widely, sort of 5 to 8 degrees across much of the British Isles, far southwest, maybe into the low teens. As we progress into tomorrow, we do see those temperatures rising much higher, more towards the low teens in the south, still colder further northwards. For the rest of the week, it's going to be more towards average temperatures around 10 to 12 degrees further southwards, high single digits further northwards. By Wednesday, still relatively mild further southwards, 10 to 12 degrees, but probably cooling slightly as we do see those colder air masses return. Thursday, looking a lot colder actually. Look at that, 4 to 9 degrees quite widely, so pretty chilly indeed. And then it's a Friday, and then another cold day looking likely with frosts overnight. But if we do now have a look at the longer range, things are looking incredibly interesting. Not only have we got Storm Debi coming up, and the models have really picked up on that in the last 24 hours, but it is definitely picked up, at least the GFS has, on some very interesting patterns in the longer term. Now, if you run through, you can see westerly winds, and you can see Storm Debi just developing there on the eastern side of this big low pressure system. That's Storm Debi developing, clearing out into the North Sea. Beyond that, we see repeated lows move in for the rest of the week, and then into the next weekend, this is where we could see high pressure build in. Now, the GFS actually only builds high pressure in for about 12 hours or so before low pressure pushes it away. And look what happens. We see high pressure build to our north, developing a northerly wind. But that northerly wind gets cut off. And look what happens. The high pressure sits on top of us and pretty much doesn't budge for about a week or so. Now, this high pressure starts out as pretty mild, but would turn cold underneath that, and the potential equivalent temperature would drop very slowly under that higher pressure, so it would turn pretty cold, frosty and foggy underneath that. You can see the dew points are towards freezing under that high pressure system. You can see that over the UK, those 0 degree dew points indicate it's quite a cold, dry air mass, so likely to see an inversion under that. So definitely been hinting at higher pressure recently, but really today it goes OTT with the higher pressure developing in for about a week or so, keeping us cold, frosty and still. I must say though, other ensemble members, as we'll see at the end of the video, developing that high pressure further northwards, and that would bring in much colder conditions. Now, if you do compare to the GM, which does also do something quite interesting towards day 10, again, westerly winds continue to come in over the next few days. High pressure tries to build in towards next weekend, but actually gets pushed away by lower pressure. So that looks like it might not really come off next weekend. Things could still change, I must remember that, but it's not looking anywhere near as dry next weekend as it was looking a few days ago. And then look at the high pressure. It builds much further northwards, up towards Greenland, and we can start to see those winds shifting into a northerly wind. Here, towards the UK, it's nothing too unusual, low pressure coming in off the Atlantic, but developing to our north, quite a cold Arctic plunge is developing and would likely come towards northwest Europe within about 3 to 5 days. And beyond this, could go to Scandinavia, could go to parts of Central Europe, or could go to Northern and Western Europe. Can't say for certain, but if you look at the 850 HPA streamlines, you can see that northerly wind starting to develop there, heading our way. And you see the temperature deviation, colder pool up there. It's not too actually great on the temperature deviation, as it still is up in the Arctic. It's only slightly colder than average, but you can see it here, minus 20 degrees from there, and that would be heading out the Arctic. Again, would be nowhere near that cold when it reaches Europe, but definitely with this pressure pattern would be developing something quite a bit colder beyond that with this high pressure block towards Iceland and Greenland. So very interesting indeed from the GM. Not bringing anything directly cold at day 10, but setting up a very interesting pattern and very interesting blocking pattern at day 10. Now, if we do compare to the ECMWF, again, westerly winds continue to come in over the next few days. High pressure tries to build in towards Saturday, but has no luck. And towards day 10, look what happens. We build an Atlantic ridge, not quite getting up towards Greenland at this stage. So it's not absolutely bitterly cold, but it is drawing in a pretty chilly northerly wind. The -5 line gets in, temperature deviation much colder than average. And if we zoom into the United Kingdom, look at those 2 metre temperatures widely towards freezing overnight, and in the day struggling around 2 to 6 degrees. So yes, it wouldn't be plunging us into the freezer. It's middle of November, remember, but it definitely would be very cold and would bring the risk of wintry showers in places. So very, very interesting seeing what the major operational runs are doing today. It can all shift. Remember, a couple of days ago, they were all showing westerly winds with bits and bobs of high pressure around, but nothing major. Now showing potentially something quite a bit different. So it can flip very quickly, and we'll have to keep a very close eye on it. Another thing, though, that I have picked up on is the ensembles have definitely shifted slightly colder. Over the next week or so, very much up and down, slightly above, slightly below at times, looking pretty unsettled. But in the longer range, it was generally average to slightly above average. Today has trended average to slightly below average, with quite a few runs down towards the -5 to -10 region. Again, still a minority, maybe a quarter to a third, but definitely is quite a big increase. And yes, the operational run there actually is very mild, but as we saw, it's a massive high pressure system and would likely have an inversion, so it would actually be pretty cold. So very interesting, not only the operational runs trended colder today, but the ensembles, especially the GFS ensembles here, have definitely trended slightly colder as well. The 2 metre temperatures definitely dropping quite a bit in the longer term. Look, definitely a big distinct drop down towards maybe 6 or 7 degrees from the majority of ensemble members, if not colder. The sea level pressure is generally very uncertain, actually. Some very high, like the operational run, some very low. So pressure pattern not decided. But again, if we did see some blocking, we could be cold under high pressure, but we could equally be cold under low pressure exiting Scandinavia. So pressure patterns not always the best to tell if we're going to see some cold weather coming up. And then finally, dew points, look at that, dropping significantly in the longer term. It's up and down over the next week. Sometimes it's dropping close towards freezing, but more consistently towards freezing in the longer term. So the models are definitely suggesting there is the risk of some colder weather in the longer term, or at least they have been hinting at it over the last couple of days, the last week or so, but definitely that risk has increased quite substantially with the latest update. But we must remember it can change very quickly. If we do compare to the ECMWF, although it probably has trended slightly colder, it's nowhere near as distinct as the GFS. Longer range, it's more average, with maybe a couple bits slightly above, slightly below. And there are quite a few runs down to the -5 level, but equally quite a few a lot higher. So yes, the ECMWF has probably trended slightly colder, but nowhere near as big a shift as the GFS has seen. So we'd probably need to see the eastern low F ensembles come on board as well before we're able to sort of talk about it a little bit more. The 2 meter temperatures as well, longer term, yes, are dropping, but here more 7 or 8 degrees than the sort of 5 or 6 degree from the GFS. And I know there's only a couple of degrees, but it does make quite a big difference in the longer term averages. So those averages are really pushed by the general trend. With GFS showing 5 or 6 degrees, it shows there's probably quite a few runs down towards 2 or 3. Here with some more 7, 8s and 9s, there's probably quite a few runs, as you can see in the low teens, which would suggest that there are more milder runs from the ECMWF here. So definitely some very interesting update today. We've got a named storm that we didn't think was actually going to happen. But yes, Storm Debi is coming tomorrow, so make sure you stay safe in northern areas. But also, the trends for the longer term have definitely increased for the risk of some colder weather. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed. Make sure you stay safe, and I'll see you again for another video soon.